get done and get out of the way. So,
Any more questions? Comments? Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you next meeting.
thanks for your time.
Thanks, Peter.
There could be one more.
Oh.
One more question or one more meeting?
Yes, Ms. Graber?
Yeah, I'd walk fast. Walk quickly.
I did have a conversation with Representative Durant, and we were talking about having him refile the gas tax.
Oh.
So I did want to just bring
Yeah,
that
time
up
to go.
before you,
Just kidding. Yeah.
because I've been having some questions about it, if you could just give them an update.
Yeah, so as you all know, refiling of the local option gas tax. There were several bills filed last session with regards to local option gas tax. It started in the town of Lenox, I think it was, Robin, if we're not
Lee.
mistaken. Lee. And then we filed it here as well. Smitty Pignatelli filed an overall bill that would allow any city or town to put on a local option. That's what we tend to find, is that if one town has an idea, other towns would start to jump on. So sometimes they just say, well, it's better just if we make it a broad law that any town can do it. Those bills all died in committee. The new session begins on the first Wednesday in January. All our bills will be filed within 3 weeks. So by the end of January, as Mr. Chairman, you know, you're well aware. So those bills will all be filed by the end of January, so I am happy to file. I'm just kidding. I'd be happy to file that on the town's behalf as well. And we'll probably see that come back. I mean, whether it has a chance or not, Speaker DeLeo's indicated that he's not opposed to, additional measures, so we'll see. But I'm certainly happy to file it for the town. And probably work with Smitty if he wants to file it as a broad bill as well.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Singer.
see, you didn't get out quick enough.
I know. I should have listened.
Since you are still here, I've been asked a lot, lately anyway, about Sunday hunting.
Okay.
That was, I think, something that may have also died in committee. I'm not sure what happened with
Yeah.
that or where that is at the moment.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of hunters who are saying, talk to the state reps. I have 2 weeks of this hunting season, so I can only hunt on Saturdays, and they work in a week, so they at least could double their time if they could hunt on Sundays
Yeah.
and whatnot. So I don't know if that's something that is dead, still alive, or if you can float that again.
It's dead for this session. I can tell you that it's been filed every session that I've been there. So this will be my 4th, and it will be filed again. I'll be perfectly honest with you, I don't see, even if you take all of us here in central Massachusetts who would be in favor of it, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of appetite from the majority of the legislature. It will get filed. We'll keep pushing. I'm just being perfectly honest in saying that I wouldn't hold my breath for it.
I appreciate your efforts. Can you make sure they know that Central Mass is watching and we don't like the fact that apparently we don't matter to them?
Well, we make that case quite clear to anyone who will listen. But yeah, absolutely. And you do. You talk about that. You have a very big contingent here in central Massachusetts who are in favor of that, who are in favor of the Second Amendment and hunting, regulations and whatnot. So you do have a lot of friends here. Unfortunately, as you move to the east, you don't have quite as many.
Hopefully some of our I know it's not the congressman, but hopefully some of them would realize, hey, a little support from them might keep them in their seats.
Yeah. Any other questions? I haven't been uncomfortable enough yet, so listen to what I can do.
I'll throw a little on there if I can.
Peter?
I just want you, here's your last chance.
That's okay.
I just want to go back to the local option gas tax
Yes.
for a second. And I appreciate your position on it. I honestly do. I know you've done your homework on it and researched it. But in my time on this board, one of my biggest frustrations has been the number of unfunded mandates that we get from the state. And parts of our budget that we have little or no control over. And I think the meals tax option has proven to be a boon, a great, asset for the town, and I really believe personally that the local option gas tax would be the same thing. I think percentage-wise, it may have a little bit more impact on local residents, because there are probably more people that buy gas in this town than eat out as much in this town. But I still think the vast majority of it's gonna come from out-of-town residents stopping on the turnpike. And, you know, where our hands are tied on so many things, just my personal opinion is I think this could be a valuable asset to the town.
Yeah, well, and I will agree with you, Mr. Swenson, is that, you know, Charlton sits in a very unique position, as well as other places, other towns that have those rest areas on the pike. You sit in that position where you get to have that revenue of people who happen to be driving by. And, you know, pragmatically, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's worked out great for the town. And so I will give you that. And you know, gas has been nice and cheap. So another 1 or 2% is not gonna break the bank, probably. But so I like I say, I am happy as I do the bidding of the town, and it's something that I'd be happy to push for.
I appreciate it.
And go in that direction. I wanted to just say, because you brought up that real quick, is that, you know, a lot of people have been talking to, and we talked about it the other night, and I know you got a busy agenda, so I'll make it quick. But the other night when we were talking about we had an educational kind of roundtable, and you know, there's a lot of talk too about the millionaire's tax that will probably be on the ballot in 2018. It's a constitutional amendment. It was voted. It takes 2 votes of the legislature to put it on the ballot. The last vote was taken last year. We'll take another vote next year, or in 18, probably next year, to put it on the ballot in 18. And, you know, a lot of people are kind of hanging their hat on this amendment. Some people on the right would call it the millionaire's tax. Those on the left would call it the fair share amendment. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of people saying, well, this is going to bring $1 billion that we can use as outlined in the amendment to pay for schools and pay for roads and things of that nature. But I think you have to be very careful when you look at some of these proposals, and especially this one. There are 3 little words in that proposal that create a loophole that you can drive a truck through. And those 3 words are subject to appropriation. And I think it was my Senate counterpart, Representative Goby, who used to say that, who said that I think she said it, is that she used to think that the 3 most important words were I love you, but now she's learned that they are subject to appropriation. Which basically means that, you know, I always say that subject to appropriation is the legislative term for the word but, which says, we're gonna take all this money, and we're gonna spend it on all these great things, but unless we don't appropriate to do it so. And that's the biggest problem that we run into. And the legislature has shown time and time again that their willingness to take in this money and then appropriate it the way they see fit is entirely different than what was outlined. So I just caution you against some of those things. I just bring that up as we talk a little bit about
Would the
some of these
local
taxes.
option gas tax be subject to appropriation? I don't believe it would be.
No, it wouldn't be, it would be probably, well, the way we
It's,
wrote it would be like the meals tax.
like the meals tax,
Yeah,
exactly.
you would have it appropriated the way you would see fit.
And I understand what you're saying, I appreciate what you're saying on the millionaire's tax, if you will. I'm not a fan of taking tax dollars out of people's pockets just because they have it. I
Yeah.
think if we had a more uniform, fair tax code, I think that's more appropriate than targeting any individual, particular group of people.
But I just bring up some of these things, because I think we are going to look at overall taxes in the upcoming session. The speaker has spoken out in favor of looking at what we can do to some would say raise revenue, some would say take money from others.
Fair enough.
I'll leave it
You've
at
been a good advocate for the town, I do appreciate that.
My pleasure, and I will certainly file that, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Representative.
All right, can I run?
Representative, please get out as fast as you can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here for open forum? I apologize, everyone. We're running a little behind on schedule, but we will try to get us up to speed. We'll move on to our appointment and resignation for two per diem dispatchers. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached, you'll find a request from Chief Purveyor to add 2 additional per diem dispatchers due to his current staff's inability to cover certain shifts on various days. Therefore, in an effort to avoid unnecessary payment of overtime, an immediate need exists to add the requested positions. In reviewing the Charlton Police Department's current pool of per diem dispatcher applicants, Chief Purveyor interviewed and selected Tom's McCully
Mulcahy.
and Tanya
Geese.
Geese. Both are certified by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as an emergency E911 dispatcher. One holds a current certifications in the CPR, first responder, APCO, public safety telecommunicator, 1, and emergency medical dispatch. Ms. Gee holds the current, also holds current certification in the APCO Public Safety Telecommunicator 1 and emergency medical dispatch, and will be completing her CPR and first responder training during the month of December. A complete background check and reference check were conducted and revealed that they both have a clean record and a solid background, and should be considered for the per diem dispatcher positions.
Thank you, Ms. Craver. What are the wishes of the board?
Through the chair,
Ms. McGrath.
I make a motion that we appoint Thomas F. Mulcahy and Tanya M. Giz as additional per diem dispatchers.
Second.
Thank you very much. A motion and a second. Discussion. Chief would ask us to introduce the candidate you have next to you.
Ms. Gies works for UPS as a dispatcher, so she's going to be in high gear in the next few days here with the Christmas holidays, but she doesn't seem to have any issues with the challenges of the multitasking of a police agency, and I wish her well. And but she went through all of the requisite training. Mr. Mulcahy is on vacation, cannot be here tonight. He's a lieutenant on the Grafton Fire Department, and along with some other jobs that he does, but he can't be here tonight. But right now we've lost a few people, and bringing on Tanya and Mr. Mulcahy will be a very good replacement and in the need that we have for dispatching, because right now we're pretty thin as far as coverage when people are out, and to cover all the 3 to 11s, 11 to 7s, and day shifts and things like that. So we
Thank you.
will.
So, any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Welcome aboard.
Let's fly through these because they're public hearings. Those guys understand.
All right, we have a 6:45 appointment for Chapter 61 for 45 J. Davis Road. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a request from Attorney Mark Eldridge on behalf of Ron Gothier, trustee of Rockaway Realty Trust, to remove approximately 38.61 acres from 445 J. Davis Road, Chapter 61 classification, in order to develop same for residential use or sale for such purpose. The Planning Board, Board of Assessors, and Conservation Commission have all reviewed the request and have no objection to the town of Charlton choosing not to exercise their right of first refusal for this request. The chairman should open the public hearing by reading the attached public hearing notice.
And I'll do so now, a public hearing notice. Please be advised that the Board of Selectmen will be holding a public hearing on Tuesday, November 22nd, 2016, at 6:45 p.m. at the Charlton Town Hall, Selectmen's Meeting Room, 37 Main Street, Charlton, Massachusetts, 01507. To act on a request by Attorney Mark A. Eldridge on behalf of Ronald Gothier, trustee of the Rockaway Realty Trust, to remove approximately 38.61 acres from 45 J. Davis Road, Chapter 61A classification, in order to develop same for residential use or sale for such purposes. Parcel ID 17-B-13. Anyone interested should appear at the date and time specified or submitting concerns or writing, and I'll declare the meeting open at 7:09 p.m. Is there anyone here for this public hearing? Ms. Craver, do we receive any concerns in writing?
No, sir.
Mr. Chair, there is someone.
Oh, is someone here? Oh, if you want to come to the microphone, sir, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everybody. Ronald Gothier, 45 J. Davis
If you
Road.
want to speak right into the microphone, please.
Ron Gothier, 45 J. Davis Road. I'm just representing the property. Just wanted to let you know who I am. I'm here. Saying thank you for inviting me here tonight.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you, and I apologize for being a little late.
Through the chair,
Mr. McGrath.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
All right, we have a motion to close the public hearing. And a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the hearing was closed at 7:10.
Through the chair.
Mr. McGrath.
I make a motion that we, the town not exercise our right of first refusal for the parcel 38.61 acres at 45 J. Davis Road.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. And we'll move on to our 650 appointment for Chapter 61 North Sturbridge Road for 19.06 acres. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a request from Attorney Kathleen Neal on behalf of Petition Nyland to remove 19.6 acres of land from Chapter 61 located on North Sturbridge Road for siting commercial solar energy generation arrays. The Planning Board, Board of Assessors, and Conservation Commission have all reviewed the request and have no objection to the Town of Charlton choosing not to exercise their right of first refusal for this request. The chairman should open the public hearing by reading the attached public notice.
I'll do so now. Please be advised that the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, November 22nd, 2016 at 6:50 PM at the Charlton Town Hall Selectmen's Meeting Room, 37 Main Street, Charlton, Mass. 01507, to act on a request by Attorney Kathleen M. Neal on behalf of Petitia Nyland to remove 19.06 acres of land from Chapter 61 located on North Sturbridge Road, Assessors Map 13-A-4 for siting commercial solar energy generation arrays. Anyone interested should appear at the date and time specified or submit any concerns in writing. Is there anyone here for the public hearing? Seeing no one. Ms. Craver, did we have any written notices?
No, sir.
No written notices? What are the wishes of the board? The hearing is open at 7:12.
Through the chair.
Ms. McGrath.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion on the motion to close the public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion passes, and the hearing is now closed at 7:13 PM.
Through the chair.
Ms. McGrath?
I make a motion that the town not exercise their right of first refusal for the parcel of 19.06 acres located at North Sturbridge Road that's currently owned by Patricia Nyland.
Second.
Thank you. Motion is second. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll move to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to our 655 appointment for Chapter 61, also on North Sturbridge Road for 3.42 acres. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. Attached is a request from Attorney Michael Maloch on behalf of Jeffrey and Lori Richardson to convert 3.42 acres of land from Chapter 61 located off of North Sturbridge Road for the use of a commercial solar array. The Planning Board, Board of Assessors, and Conservation Commission have all reviewed the request and have no objection to the Town of Charlton choosing not to exercise its right for first refusal for this request. The chairman should open the public hearing by reading the attached public hearing notice.
Thank you, Ms. Craver, and I'll do so now. Please be advised that the Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, November 22nd, 2016 PM at 6:55 PM at the Charlton Town Hall, Selectmen's Meeting Room, 37 Main Street, Charlton, Mass. 01507, to act on a request by Attorney Michael C. Maloch on behalf of Jeffrey and Lori Richardson to convert 3.42 acres off North Sturbridge Road from Chapter 61 for use as a commercial solar array. Assessors Map 2, Block A, Assessors Map 2, Block A, Lot 5.11. Anyone interested should appear at the time and date specified or submit concerns in writing. I'll declare the meeting open at 7:14 PM. Is anyone here for the public hearing? Seeing none, Ms. Craver, did we receive any concerns in writing?
No, sir.
We did not. What are the wishes of the board?
Through the chair.
Mr. McGrath.
I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote on the motion. Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. The meeting is now closed at 7:14 PM.
Through the chair.
Mr. McGrath.
I make a motion that the town of Charlton not exercise the right of first refusal for 3.42 acres of land located off of North Sturbridge Road, Assessors Map 2-A-5.11.
Second.
Thank you. A motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you very much. And we'll now move to our 7 o'clock appointment with the Provisional Police Chief with Mr. Livingston. Ms. Craver?
Yes, sir. You're scheduled tonight to hold the provisional police chief interviews tonight. The board has reviewed applications that we received and chose 4 candidates to interview. 2 candidates have withdrawn from the process. The following two candidates have been scheduled as follows. For 7 o'clock, we have Scott Livingston, and 7:30 is Daniel Charette. We have compiled a list of 11 questions to be asked by both candidates. You may have follow-up questions, but I ask you to save them to the end. Remember, 30 minutes each was the allotted time, and I did tell them we were running a little late, and I would come and get the first candidate. So if you're ready, I will go get him.
If you can get Mr. Livingston, that'd be perfect, thank you. And, thank you. And just to echo Ms. Craver's comments, please write down any questions you may have, and we'll ask him within time at the end. And we'll each go down the list and ask the questions. You'll notice your initials next to each question, so please.
It's over there.
I'll steal one of Ms. Craver's.
Nah, she's always good for that, thank you.
Welcome. Mr. Livingston, welcome to our board. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. I apologize for the tardiness. Some issues came up. Usually when the representatives of senators come here, we like to grill them for a little bit, ask them what's going on.
I don't blame you.
So I would offer you the chance to briefly introduce yourself, very briefly, and then we'll get to some questions.
Okay, Scott Livingston, from Athol.
If you want to speak right into the microphone, please.
Brief history, law enforcement for 31 years, last 12 as chief. Right out of high school, had an opportunity 14 months ago to retire to take care of a family member, so I took it.
Thank you very much. So we'll be going through a list of 11 questions. We'll each take turns asking them, and there might be some follow-up questions at the end. So we'll begin. Question number 1. Why are you interested in becoming the provisional police chief of the Charlton Police Department?
After being retired for 14 months, it's time to do something. And like I said, I went into law enforcement right out of high school, and it's what I've done. It's what I know. So this opportunity wasn't long term, so it fit the bill for what I was looking for.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to come down and adjust the mic.
Oh, thank you.
Continue, just because there's a problem with hearing.
Okay.
Mr. Livingston, what sets you apart from other candidates we will meet?
I believe my, as far as listening, would be one of the strong points. I've been doing this for 31 years, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. One part of doing my job that I've done is listening to others, and it seems to work out very well. Another strong point would be budgeting.
Thank you. Mr. Singer?
Please tell us about an accomplishment that you are especially proud of.
Well, that could be a catch-22. 6 months into a budget year, I took a $80,000 hit, which I wasn't proud of, but we accomplished rearranging the schedule to maintain the same services to the town without losing anybody. That part of it I was proud of.
Mr. Livingston, can you tell us about something that you failed at and how you handled that?
I'm not always politically correct, and sometimes I shoot from the hip. And that's something over the last 12 years as chief I've worked on overcoming. It's a little different than working 3 to 11 as a patrolman.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper?
Please describe your understanding of the duties and responsibilities of a provisional police chief.
Well, those duties, I believe, will be set by this board, but I don't believe they would be too much off of a regular police chief. Schedule and budgets, maintaining staying within those budgets and maintaining operational needs for the town and services to the town.
Thank you. Please describe your experiences as an administrator, your experience with budgets, as a supervisor of staff, and if I can reread these if you want, and as an incident commander at an emergency or incident scene. So we'll start with your experience as an administrator.
Been an administrator for 12 years, in charge of 3 different departments, 3 different budgets, 3 different unions. That was for the last 10 years. Prior to that, it was a smaller department. I was only responsible for the police department and animal control.
Thank you. And your experience with budgets.
The 3 budgets I was in charge of last totaled about 1.3 million, if I remember correctly. That was police department, the emergency dispatch, and animal control. We started the budget process end of December, beginning of January, and that usually went on till March. And I worked hand in hand with the town manager on that.
Thank you. And your experience as a supervisor of staff.
The last 10 years, I was in charge of about 24, and that included emergency dispatch, animal control, and the police department. Some were civil service, some were non-civil service, so you have the hoops to jump through with the state.
Thank you. And your experience as an incident commander at an emergency or incident scene.
Within about a month of me taking over in 2006 in Winchington, we had a home invasion and sexual assault of a school teacher. And that incident comes to mind right off the bat. There were reporters there within, it happened about 5 in the morning, so by daylight there were reporters there, and we had the place taped off and cordoned off, and that type of thing hadn't happened out that way since probably the early 80s. So that was a big to-do in town. I've handled ice storms and snowstorms and incidents such as those my entire career, whether I was chief or patrolman.
Thank you. Ms. McGrath?
Mr. Livingston, describe your leadership style in the buildings, you know, how you ran the departments when you were there.
Open door policy. First few days of taking over, I met with every employee, no matter what shift it was. We had one-on-one meetings. Found out their likes, their dislikes, what direction they wanted to see the department going, what direction it was going. When those were done, we had a department meeting with everybody there, and I made a list of what they'll talk to you one-on-one about, because usually they won't open up in a full room. So I brought everything that was discussed, brought it to light, and it was kind of a basis to start, and that's where we worked from. They're the face of the department. They're on the street. They're providing the service to the townspeople.
Thank you. Mr. Singer?
Can you describe your communications and conflict resolution skills? How would you handle a conflict with a subordinate or with a public official?
I usually will try to turn the tables on them. If there is an issue, I'll put them in my chair and say, what should I do to you regarding this? And see what they come up with. And I have worked through 90% of them that way. When you bring them in, they already know they messed up. I mean, you've got to deal with it. Sometimes giving them that little leeway and discuss it with them from a different standpoint has helped, and it makes them understanding, and if they do get disciplined, makes it a little bit easier, is what I found.
Thank you. Mr. Swenson?
Can you describe what your short-term strategic goals for the department, if chosen, and also your operational goals?
Again, it would start with the one meetings the first week to get all the employees on the same Paige at a department meeting by the end of the week, to meet with the town administrator to see what the administration's goals are, and put those together with the needs of the department and to move forward. Like I said, I'm not here to reinvent the wheel. This is a short term. It's kind of to keep the ship in a straight line until the town makes a decision on a permanent replacement.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper?
What is your view toward Class A license applications?
Hot topic right now, Second Amendment. All the training I have gone to over the last 10 years, if they are qualified to get it, they get it. If there's a disqualifier, and it's a state disqualifier, they don't get it. But we've been instructed, every class, as far as choosing between A and B or restrictions or everything else to stop. So that was my practice for the last 6 years. If they're qualified to have it, they get it.
Okay, thank you. And the final question, while the position is interim, it will certainly set a tone for the department moving forward. With that in mind, can you tell us briefly your definition of community policing and your position on community policing?
Like I said, the officers are the front line, and we're providing a service to the town. That's part of the meeting process. They don't all see it that way, that we're service providers, but that's exactly what we are. And we were doing community policing 30 years ago before we even knew we were doing it. We were helping the elderly across the street. We were, stopping and changing the light bulb on the front porch and doing those things. I came from a small town, and they called us for everything. From the kids not listening to the dog won't come in or the cat stopping in the tree. You received all the phone calls. And when they knew you by first name and they knew where you lived, if you didn't respond to them, they showed up at your house. So it's what I've done my entire career. It's a service, and to provide the service the best that we can and for the townspeople.
Thank you. And now, I imagine some of us have some follow-up questions, so we'll field
Okay.
those. This popcorn style. Mr. Swenson?
I have a couple, if I may.
Yes, please.
Out in Athol, does Athol use a strong chief, and are you familiar, are you comfortable working in a department and in a town that does use a strong chief, even if it's on an interim basis?
I was a strong chief in Winchington.
Okay.
I do not believe Athol is a strong chief any longer. I've worked as both. If you have a good rapport with the administration, I came from a town manager or a town administrator, there's not enough of a difference to sway me one way or the other. You can make, a few more choices as one than the other, but in this type of a job where it's short-term, I wouldn't step out and make any major changes without running that by the administration of the town. I don't believe that's the place of an interim.
Thank you. I have one other. I just want to make sure I word it properly to get across what I want to ask. I guess how I want to phrase this is where it's going to be a temporary provisional position. How do you go about earning the respect of the force? I mean, we have a very professional force in town. That's why I'm being careful, so I don't want to give any illusion that, we have a very professional police force in town. The note that I made, just to make sure I got the question the way I wanted it, was kind of like the substitute teacher. Where the guys know that this isn't a long-term thing. I mean, how do you go about coming in and saying, I'm the boss, even if it's for a year or whatever that time is?
It is a profession that doesn't demand respect, but usually gets the respect in that position. But I've also dealt with unions for 12 years, and it's, to use a similarity with the unions, union president always thinks a little bit differently. And I was union president for 6 years in Orange. So what I tell them is, I will sit with you and discuss anything you want to discuss. But at the end of the day, the union doesn't run this place, I do. So if there was an issue, it would probably go along those terms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. I know you mentioned how back in 2006 in Winchendon, you dealt with a pretty nasty home invasion. Can you tell us any specifics on how you handled it, specifically how you dealt with the press, how you dealt with particularly the incident?
Probably upset the press. Be quite honest with you. I'm not going to re-victimize the victim or the family. So at the point of that incident, they were given absolutely what they needed to be given, and that was it. We had an incident. It was obvious. We had everybody in town that we could possibly have in town working on it. Solved it very quickly. It was turned over to the DA's office very quickly, and the information came out of the DA's office. There was probably a couple-hour period in between there that they weren't happy because the information wasn't readily available. But I was more concerned with the victim and the victim's kids at that point. And I just wasn't going to re-victimize them by going down that road at that point.
And how did you specifically accomplish that? Like, what skills did you implement to really make that?
I don't even remember the reporter now, but I went over, very nicely. I, introduced myself to him because I had just got there, and I don't even believe I owned a uniform at the time. And just explained to him, we do have an incident here. The information will be forthcoming, but right now we're more concerned with the family and the victim than we are, basically with your deadline. And they understood.
Thank you very much. Mr. Swenson?
I have one more if I could. I know a lot, having had some discussions with our chief, I know a lot of towns have wrestled with the passage of question 4 on the recent election, which is the legalization of marijuana. How do you, I could see that over the next year as that starts to rear its head and present the inherent problems with it. I just appreciate any thoughts you have on how that's gonna be dealt with. And
We went through some of it with medical when that passed. The issue we're going to have with this one is similar to the medical. They weren't ready for it.
yeah,
This is going in, my understanding is December 14th, and they're not even getting back in session until January. So it's going to be very similar to the medical, where there's going to be a space of time that it's legal, and they're not ready for it. So we're going to do the same thing we did then. We're going to do the best we can do. And when the actual law comes out, my guess is going to be you're going to have to go through dispensaries. It's going to be taxed, and it's going to be like buying cigarettes. Unfortunate side of that is it's not going to get rid of, if you want to call it the black market, marijuana. This law isn't going to correct that.
Mr. Singer, you had a question?
thank you.
Yeah, regarding the Class A licenses, as far as, if they're qualified versus and disqualifiers. As an interim chief, so I'm curious, like, from your perspective, what are disqualifiers? Because as the interim chief, you're sometimes may find yourself in the uncomfortable position of not knowing the applicant. Whereas had you been the chief for 15 or 20 years, you know the residents, you know the citizens, you may know histories and know more disqualifiers.
Right.
So as an interim that won't personally have that knowledge, what would you view as disqualifiers then?
The state tells you what the disqualifiers are. What you're talking about is we do have discretion for suitability. And you're asking basically more about the suitability of an individual. And with myself just coming in, we have a network of chiefs in this area that I've worked with over the last 10 or 12 years. I've reached out to them, and plus the guys in the department know these guys. It wouldn't be a sole decision of myself, and right now I'm not sure if the chief's doing it or I had my lieutenant doing them, so I'm not sure who the signing authority is on those. That would have to be something to be checked into.
I believe it is the chief, right?
Okay, but what I was talking about are the state disqualifiers.
Okay.
Suitability brings in a whole different avenue.
Right. So, thank you, but yes, that is what I was talking
Okay.
about, or referring to as the suitability part.
Yeah, so what I would be, mainly be doing on those, reaching out to the guys in the department, looking at the in-house calls and records and the names, and relying on the people that know them better than I do, obviously. And then again, we have a network of chiefs here, and I mean, like I said, I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel. If Chief Revere is gonna be close by, I have no problem calling Jim at all. I've known him for a long time. We've worked close together on different projects.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have another question. You, when you talking about your goals, do you have one-on-one meetings, talk with the town administrator? Do you have any specific goals you would personally like to bring to the department in the near future, or a longer-term goal?
Without meeting with the guys and seeing the direction of what the department's already going, my first goal would be to continue the department in a correct direction that I believe it's already going, and maintain that long enough for you to bring in a permanent chief. With that being said, if changes have to be made, then changes have to be made. Without knowing that at this point, it's hard to give you an exact answer of what I would do at what time.
Thank you. Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Livingston. I asked if you want to wait outside while we interview the other candidate. I'm going to call a 3-minute recess for us to finish, our evaluations and to process our thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So if,
Ms. Greer?
for process,
Yep.
so what you have in front of you are sheets with numbers. There's a total score down at the bottom. If you can add up your scores and put that down at the bottom, what I will do after, if this is what the chair wants, and we had a little talk, I will get the scores and have them for you right after the second one, so you'll be able to take a look at that.
So, we'll be in recess for a couple minutes just to look over these, make sure we have the correct scores.
And I have my cell phone here if anybody wants to use my calculator. You're laughing. This is complicated here.
It's like trig homework all over again.
I had my shoes off and I was counting on that.
I will go let the other person know.
Yep.
It'll be a couple of minutes.
Take this time to use the facilities as well.
to me, I'll start to do the tallies too. And if you circled more than one, if you can undo whatever, or pick one. Thanks. You.
Speaking tonight.
Okay,
Is that all the evaluations, Ms. Graber?
it is. Are you ready for your next person?
We're back. We're now out of recess at 7:41. Is everyone ready for the next person?
Just before you bring
Yes.
it in, can I just ask a question of the board?
Sure. if you want-
Nothing about who
Yep.
you're gonna pick tonight.
Do you want to
Just,
come with the mic, Chief?
my question is this. I've already spoken to the town administrator, and she's probably already spoken to you. So, again, today, after I met with the town administrator, you know, on a regional dispatch, I called and talked again to the director of operations, Bruce Howard.
Is this about the assessment center?
Yes.
I would ask you to hold
Yeah.
that, please.
Chief, if you want to, if we can finish up the interviews,
Okay.
that process, I will definitely
I just,
entertain
I
talking.
just want my staff to know where it goes for the permanent position. That's all.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Chief.
That's all.
Welcome, Mr. Shred. Please have a seat. I apologize for us running a little late. When we have one of our state reps here, we want to take the opportunity to definitely grill him.
No problem at all.
So what this format is because it's going to be about 30 minutes long. We
Okay.
have 11 questions. We're going to ask you to take turns going around the board.
Thank you.
Asking those questions. And
Okay.
then at the end, if there's time, might have some follow-up questions.
Sure.
So I'll first invite you to please briefly just, introduce yourself to the board and to the people watching at home.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dan Charette, recently retired police chief from Southbridge. I'm a dad, 2 children. My wife Kathy is here with me this evening. I spent the last 35 years in law enforcement and really look forward to the possibility of working with all of you.
Thank you. And without further ado, I'll ask the first question. Why are you interested in becoming the provisional police chief of the Charlton Police Department?
Well, I was really excited when I heard about it. I actually started my police career here 35-plus years ago. Beautiful community. My wife and I had lived here for over a decade. Kathy actually was the school nurse here. I'm just a couple of miles down the road. It's a great place, and just love the work. And I'd really be honored to get a chance to work here for a while with all of you.
Thank you. Ms. McGrath?
What sets you apart from other candidates we'll meet?
Well, I, along with all the other challenges a police department faces, of course, one of the challenges you're facing is the hiring of a new police chief. For the last 5 years, I was a member of the Civil Service Committee for the Mass Chiefs. I was on the executive board. I'm still on the executive board for the Central Mass Chiefs. In that capacity, I became chairman of the Civil Service Committee. Part of those duties, I, along with 3 or 4 other chiefs, wrote the exams for HRD, Civil Service, administered those exams, and literally dozens of communities. I've been involved in the hiring process from sergeants, lieutenants, deputy chiefs, captains, and I believe I can help you walk through that process, which can be quite expensive, but I believe I can help you get through that, being fiscally conservative, but at the same time giving you the absolute best possible candidates.
Thank you. Mr. Singer?
One moment, please tell us about an accomplishment that you are especially proud of?
Over the years, I've faced a lot of challenges. I worked in a very diverse community and a very poor community, which sometimes increases the need for policing. What I'm most proud of, I think, is the juvenile delinquency prevention that we did. When I first became chief, there was approximately 180 children for the last 3 years who had been adjudicated delinquent. We worked very hard in very many different ways with some good people. We reduced that to less than 30 within 3 years, and we're able to maintain that over the life of my tenure. I was chief for almost 14 years. Policing is an expensive endeavor for communities. The only thing more expensive for the state is housing prisoners and criminals. And it is by far socially and economically the best thing to do is prevent crime before it begins. And we did a great job at that. And I want to stress, did that with a lot of good people that I had the opportunity to work with. But I'm most proud of that.
Thank you. Mr. Swenson?
Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Can you give us an example of something that you failed at, something that didn't work, and how you handled that?
Yes, what frustrated me the most was the substance abuse. Early on in my career, we would see cocaine or a few things in some of the bars, and it was almost something that you looked at and thought, oh, that's a bad person. That's somebody who doesn't have a focus in their life. Well, over the next few years, and now I realize it's nationwide, it's become abundantly clear, and it was to me, having worked so closely with so many of the people in the community for so long, I knew these families, I knew their children. As they grew up and got involved in substance abuse, and, we did everything I think you could think of in those days. We did the drug raids. We had the undercover informants. We did all the papers you could possibly do. And it was always so frustrating that we couldn't really put a dent in it. I'm very thankful to see now that I think society in general has realized that this isn't just a policing issue. And we've since got on board the medical community, the mental health community, the courts themselves. So I was frustrated that we couldn't make the progress. We were just getting to that point in my last few years. So I think that was the toughest part, especially being so community-oriented. I was born there. I knew everybody there. It's when you're that intimately involved, and I think you have to be a good chief. That was frustrating. But I think they're making inroads now.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper?
Please describe your understanding of the duties and responsibilities of the provisional police chief.
Wow, that's, well, with me, it's everything. Crime is just a surface scratch of policing. With me, I was involved with the schools, with the kids, with the seniors, with the businesses, to some extent with the state and the politicians, because when you see some concerns that arise, that's where the help comes from. So everything that you can think of in a community, I always said as a police chief, almost everything that happened touched us, whether it was at the schools, whether it was at the DPW, whether it was at the fire service. Almost everything that came up somehow or other touched us. And I think it's extremely important to be in touch with that because, again, prevention is worth so much more than just reacting when something bad happens. So I think you've got to be a part and parcel of as much as you can be and be aware of what's going on.
Thank you. So this is a multi-part question. I'll break it down by parts. Please describe your experience, one as an administrator.
Well, I've got a master's degree in criminal justice administration. As I said, I had started here in Charlton for about 3 years. I went over to Southbridge. I worked my way up through the ranks from sergeant, lieutenant, and then eventually chief. But fully over the, let's see, over the 35 years, approximately half of that was in administration. Up to and including twice, I was the town manager for short tenures. So pretty much everything, again, across the spectrum. In that particular situation, we had a city form of government, and I was responsible for the budgeting, the hiring, and everything else that can go wrong with, running a business with 75 employees.
Thank you. And can you please describe your experience with budgets? I know you mentioned that you already touched on that, but if you want to elaborate a little more, you're more than welcome to.
Since, let's see, the last 17 years, since I was lieutenant, in that capacity, I wrote almost all of the grants that we did, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars on different facets, whether it be drug interdiction, click it or ticket, in those days, community policing, involved in $500,000 grants with the schools, and then, of course, the day-to-day budgeting within the police department. Our overall budget was about $3.1 million, and there was about another $300,000 or $400,000 in grants and different pieces that we worked with.
Okay. And can you describe your experience as a supervisor of staff?
Well, we had at different times a deputy chief, 2 lieutenants, 8 sergeants, the administration. I also ran the animal control. We also had a 30-plus person auxiliary department. It was kind of people came and went kind of quickly. We trained a lot of folks for other communities. If they worked with us, they were really embraced by other communities because they did some serious work. So on all levels, as I said, from starting patrolman to the deputy chief, I encompassed it all.
Thank you. And lastly, for this question, sorry, this is such a long question, but please describe your experiences as an incident commander at an emergency or incident scene.
Well, about, is it 3-4 years ago now, we had a little tornado came through. I grabbed my son, I ran to the station, and I came home from work about 4 days later. We've had several things like that. We had a horrendous flood at one point where we literally had every asset you can think of from the state and federal. So I can go into more depth if you'd like, but I certainly have been involved in many incidents like that. I've done many drills for that. We've written grants for the drills. So I've certainly put in a lot of time on a lot of different venues, but I can get into more depth if you'd like. I don't know how deep you want me to dig this evening.
Possibly as a follow-up, but I think
Okay.
that answers that question pretty good. So I'll pass it on to Mr. McGrath. Thank you.
Describe your leadership style and abilities.
Definitely situational. Let's see, about 3 years ago, we decided to go to electronic control weapons, tasers. And I was not convinced at all. We met with the union, we met with the officers, we met with the SWAT team members. I spoke to the other departments that had them, spoke with my administrators. And in a situation like that, you get input from everybody. The collective knowledge is certainly better than the lone person. And you make your best decision. Now to jump back slightly for a moment to the tornado. I showed up, and for a couple of days, I barked a lot of orders. And in an emergency situation, the people I worked with knew me, and they knew what needed to be done, and there was no questions in a circumstance like that. So definitely situational. Sometimes it's autocratic, sometimes it's very democratic. But you've got to consider, what's going on at the moment and deal with that then.
Thank you. Mr. Singer?
Can you describe your communications and conflict resolution skills? How would you handle a conflict with a subordinate and with a public official?
Both very similar. I guess the one thing I've been accused of sometimes is being too nice. Anybody can have a bad day if it's a subordinate situation. And if it's something very low level, if it is something that was not done intentionally, in almost all circumstances, I would make an effort to give that person proper direction, let them know that it's certainly not acceptable, and it won't be again, and put their future in their hands. And I found the vast majority of the time, somebody who cared about what they were doing and knew what they were doing corrected themselves. If it was more than that, well, then it got more severe than that. With public officials, with me, the boss is the boss. My supervisors, I've had 9 different managers, and I've gotten great relationships with every one of them to today. One of them called me a week ago about doing an interview and doing, for them, they wanted to use me as a reference. And I've always requested that if there was a conflict in what was going on, that they'd hear me out as a department head, but in the final analysis, my boss is my boss, and once they heard me, if they had a different decision, that's the way it went. And I did my best to implement that.
Thank you. Mr. Swenson?
Can you tell us what would be your short-term strategic goals and also your operational goals for this department if you were chosen?
Well, I've looked at the past crime stats and that. I think in many ways your department does a fantastic job. I know you have a relatively new lieutenant. I would hope that I would be able to spend time with that person and help develop them into a second-in-command person that you can someday promote. I realize that that's not the direction you're going in right now, and I understand that with a person with just a short tenure. But I would like to see everybody advance as far as they can. One of the big things we always did was we always tried to listen to anybody who wanted a specialty, was willing to work towards that specialty. And I've always encouraged that, and I'd like to do that with your command staff and with the officers themselves. If there's something, you know, that they would like to put forward, I'd like to hear what that is and bring those to the administrator. And I think something like this is a great chance for them to, you know, express themselves, and I think that should all be heard. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper?
What is your view toward Class A license applications?
We had a process in place, and I believe it should be a process that a person who has not committed a felony can go through in a respectful way and follow the rules as they are. I've always been careful. We have a basic form that asks for the person's information as applicable by law. We go through that, and if a person follows the proper regulations, they are awarded a Class A license.
And last question. While the position is interim, it certainly sets a tone for the department moving forward. With that in mind, can you tell us briefly your definition of community policing and your position on community policing?
You know, a lot of people have thrown that around for decades, but I can tell you without question that by far the best police officers are the ones who live and breathe that. In my humble opinion, a lot of the problems that we see nationwide are because police have waited to interact with the community until there's a problem. You don't do that. You talk to people every day, you see what's going on, you know somebody's concerns. You talk to them in the best of situations so that when something does go bad, and sometimes things do, when something goes bad, they know you as a person, they know your officers, they know your people, they know who you really are and what you really represent. So to me, that's, if you're in uniform, you better live that way. You are the community.
Thank you. And I will, we still have a couple more minutes left. I will kick off the follow-up questions. Mr. Singer?
I'm going to ask the same question I asked before. Regarding the Class A, as an interim chief, you're not really going to have the benefit of knowing everyone. If you had been the chief for 10, 15 years, you might know these applicants regarding suitability.
Sure.
You may know histories and whatnot. So as an interim who won't have that, how would you handle that part of the Class A process?
Well, there are relatively limited circumstance where you can say somebody's unsuitable. Now, over my, gosh, I don't know the exact number. We issued approximately 200 licenses a year. Over the years, I 4 or 5 times went to court for saying somebody was unsuitable, and then what the recourse is you go to the district court. If the chief doesn't give the license, your first recourse is the district court. I only had to do that 4 or 5 times, and in all cases, the judge saw in my favor. So, although I'm very careful, we do look very closely at that. I think it's a very important issue. I also firmly believe that if somebody is legally acceptable through the process, that they have that right. It is a statute, and I don't always agree with every statute, but as a police chief, we are there to enforce the statutes. We have argued at times to change some statutes, but as the statute stands, that's what we do.
Thank you. I know you mentioned earlier about going after many grants in your tenure in the public service field. What would be some grants? Would you pursue any grants? What would your plan for as an interim chief be towards grants? Would you go after any specific grants? Do you want to explain any of that?
In the timing, if in fact we take this through January, with the federal schedule and the rest, there are a few state that will be available come springtime, 911, a few others that I see Charlton already has. I went through and saw, what is being worked on now, click it and take it in those. So I would certainly go after those to ensure that we don't lose anything. On the federal end, probably the timing isn't right for that over the next, half a year or so. But whatever is available, I get alerts on them. And if I think it's money that we can use, I go after it. I tried for everything. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Mr. McGrath?
What size budget was Saltbridge?
The basic budget was 3.1 million,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Mr. Swenson?
If I could. Does Southbridge use a strong chief, and if not, are you familiar with and comfortable with dealing in a strong chief community?
I was a strong chief,
First
yes.
strong chief.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
Where this is a provisional position, how do you establish yourself quickly in short term as the boss? We've got a very high-level police department. We've got a great staff.
You do.
But still, you're coming in as the new guy. And how
Sure.
do you, within a short time frame, establish yourself as the boss?
Well, fortunately, we share courthouses, we share SWAT teams, we share the task force. I know a lot of the members, known them for years. Those that I don't, one of my first actions would be to make sure I get out to every shift, speak with everybody, let them see me. And again, talk to them, listen, see what's needed, what's not. If everything's great, that's fantastic. But if there are things that needed to be done, I want to be the ear for that. The very grassroots of every police department is patrol. The administration, and I know some people don't look at it this way, but we're there to support them. And I can't do that unless I know what they want, what they need, and what's going on. So first and foremost, translate that to them. Let them know, yes, I'm here for a certain capacity, for a certain time, but in that capacity, I want to be the one to support what the needs are for the community so they can do the work that they need to do.
Thank you. Just one more, if I may.
Please.
Whoever our provisional chief is going to have to start dealing with some of the implications of question 4, the legalization of marijuana that just got voted in. And as I read it, it's kind of going to be a free-for-all for a start. There really aren't a lot of guidelines. So how do you see that?
Well, if I may say publicly, that was the poorest piece of written law. Very typically what they do when a law is enacted is they do a philosophy, and then they take that back and they put the nuts and bolts together around it. They did this the other way to placate a lot of the wrong people, I think. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge for everybody. As I said, I'm still on the executive board for the Central Mass Chiefs. I was just reading some of the things from the Mass Chiefs yesterday. Honestly, I think it's going to be a learning process for all of us. We're going to have to really dig in and work through this. My fear is what it's going to do on the juvenile end. I don't like it at all. But that's, again, we don't make the laws, but we have to do our best, and I certainly will try.
You mentioned in your conflict resolution question that for smaller things you would work with them, obviously show them that it's wrong and go through the change. Could you go over some instances like if you have, or what you would do in a case where they didn't correct themselves and a problem became chronic, or it was a more moderate or severe infraction?
Sure. Something like on a motor vehicle stop, things get loud, somebody swears at somebody, somebody's speaking inappropriately. Again, it's very difficult, without an exact situation, but in general, if that was a one-time thing, if it had never happened before, if there was some extenuating circumstance, okay. If now I've gotten this the second time, if I get it a third time, then it's retraining and it's discipline. That discipline may include a suspension. It may include punishment duty. It's hard to really get specific without, but there's every level of that right up to and including going to my administrator. As a civil service chief, you probably know already, but the most drastic action a civil service chief can take is a 5-day suspension. Beyond that, we go to our administrator, who's the appointing authority, and discuss that with them, and it goes from there.
Thank you. Mr. Swenson?
One last one, if I could. We've lived, it says on your resume that you've been in town for 11 years. So can you tell us a couple of differences you see between Southbridge and Charlton in how the job of police chief would work, and if anything that you see that kind of makes this a unique or different kind of community?
Well, that's one of the things that you really have to look at with hiring a chief. Policing is very unique depending on, to the particular community. Southbridge was more of an urban environment. The needs day-to-day were a little bit different than I see here. As I said, as far as crime went, the beanie, the brakes, you seem to get that from the surrounding communities. That is a different type of patrol than knowing that, when our bars close at 2 o'clock in the morning, everybody better be there. So you've got to, amend your concerns and your personnel to where, the problems are. So it's sometimes day-to-day, sometimes there's a big event going on, like an Old Home Day, and everybody's there. Other times, in the middle of a snowstorm, well, everybody better be ready for the accidents. It's situational.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions? No? Thank you so much. Once again, I apologize for
No,
the delay,
not at all.
And thank you for taking time coming here. I would ask you to please wait in the hallway.
Well, I really appreciate your time this evening. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And we will enter a 5-minute recess to finish our evaluations and allow the town administrator to tabulate the scores.
Oh, I didn't sign it. I know, I'm slacking, whatever it is. Exactly. Work. Harumph. Give the governor a harumph.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer.
Wow. And they say one vote doesn't count.
I know.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So, I have the scores, and I'm not sure if you would like to bring them back in to have the discussion, or if you'd rather have discussion now among yourselves before you bring them in. I guess I would ask that.
Or would you all prefer?
I'm not even sure we had any plan about how we're gonna proceed after the scores are tabulated.
So why don't I tell you, ask them to come back in, I'll tell you the scores, and you can decide how you'd like to proceed?
Sound good?
Sure.
Okay.
I would like to know beforehand how we're gonna handle it.
My understanding was that the board had wanted to be the interviewers, and as I had shared with the board, that doesn't qualify because it's the ending to be in any executive session.
I think it still frustrates me that we don't have the opportunity to address the board on that decision.
I remember this process was asked to be a very public and transparent process.
And everything was, but at some point there's really, we discuss what we can.
So thank you again for answering all those questions, coming here tonight. Very, very good answers, and you know it's really nice having two very qualified candidates. And I know Ms. Graber took the time to tabulate all the scores from the evaluations. If you want to share that with us, and then
Yes, sir.
we'll proceed however the board wants to proceed.
So the candidate with the most, highest score would be Daniel
Charette.
my God. Mr. Charette, with a score of 660, and Mr. Livingston has a score of 513.
Thank you. So I will open up to the board of how you wish to proceed tonight. If you would like to make the appointment now, if you'd like to start the discussion, see where it leads, or postpone it. And I'll open up to you all for a motion or a discussion. Ms. Graber?
While you're thinking about it, I'd just like to thank both of the candidates, because I think you can't go wrong with either one that you choose. I think you have two qualified people, so it's a tough one. I feel like I'm on The Voice going, gee, I don't know what you're going to do. You got a tough one.
Absolutely.
But thank you very much for both of you.
And the process started with a stack of paper about this high, with all the candidates, and, you know, obviously you both made it to the final.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when we got to the point of having to look at a provisional chief, I was more than a little anxious about the whole prospect of doing it. I wasn't sure how it would work, how it was gonna serve the town well. And then when we did get this stack of paperwork, I said, how are we even gonna get through this? But fortunately for the town, which is our primary responsibility, we're in a no-lose situation, I think, is in that we have two exceptional candidates, great histories, great work experiences, great answers to all the questions. With that said, I think based on the scores, I would offer a motion that we appoint Daniel Charette as our provisional police chief.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just would point out that, I am thankful that you both came. Well, Ms. Craver and others know I'm not necessarily thrilled with all of the processes that were a part of this and how we got to this point. But the scores are from the board of 5. And since I assume we had no prior direction how we're gonna handle this, that the higher score would naturally be the one to be appointed. I think that they're both very qualified, and I'm thankful that they both came.
I mean, I would just offer that we're not bound to the scores. If there's a legitimate, if anyone wants to make any case one way or the other, I think, we have that opportunity.
Is there any other discussion? We'll move to a vote on the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. So thank you again for both, congratulations, and welcome aboard, and Ms. Graver?
Well, let's, thank you. And then I would ask Dan.
No, sorry. Thank you so much. Nice to meet you as well. Thank you for coming down.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in.
So, if it's okay, can you take a seat for a moment? I'm gonna talk with the board a little bit. So, do you want a pitch, were you trying to get a picture? We can accommodate reporters here. So, through the chair,
Ms. Graver?
thank you very much for
Thank
your
you.
consideration.
Thank
We look forward to working with you. As you know, one of the first things that we're going to be doing, we'll be working with the civil service to hire a full-time police officer.
Yes.
So I'm very pleased that they've appointed someone who has civil service experience. The chief started to come up, and I asked him to hold off because I wanted to have this conversation with the board moving forward and whoever was going to be the candidate. I've already informed the board that, and through the chief had let me know when you guys had come back from one of your chief meetings, that we were informed that there was not going to be a test
Right,
in May.
I did take the liberty of speaking with Bruce, Bruce Howard is the director, and went through the process, but Salem ran into something very similar just a short time ago, and I think I can help you get through that and, again, get through the best possible candidate. Assessment centers can be quite expensive, but depending on the timing and the selection of what pieces you would like to go first. So I think I can walk you through that, so it's very reasonable, and you end up with very good candidates.
So I have some RFPs for assessment centers, and I'll be looking forward to working with you on that also.
Good,
And working
please.
with civil service as well as the department.
Good.
Mrs.
So
Singer? Do you have something?
that's,
No, when she's done,
Okay, sorry.
that's one piece. The other piece, if that's about the assessment center and the hiring of a new chief, that would be one. The other piece is, we need to negotiate a contract with your new appointment. So I will have a conversation, if this is the process you'd like, I'll have a conversation with Danny and see what we can come up with, and I'll bring back a recommendation to you
Thank you.
on
That's
time,
fine.
term,
You
and
need a
benefits
motion
or
on that,
whatever.
or-
To authorize me to negotiate a contract, yes.
Okay. I make a motion that we give the town administrator the authority to negotiate a contract with the interim police chief.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you. Ms. Singer, did you have something?
Yeah, one of my concerns regarding the hiring of the next chief after we finish with the interim chief, and move to a permanent role.
You just got here.
Yeah,
We're
you know, we're
finished.
talking about.
So, that's okay, I
No, but,
can, I can take it.
Thank you. And this predates you even coming in here. One of my concerns was, I think always has been, and you know, was a purely assessment center oriented process. for me, I wanted the test and the assessment center and this board, three pieces, you know. And throughout this process going forward, it does bother me that we don't have a chief's test.
May I address that for you, Ms. Craver? Would that be acceptable? What you can do, sir, and a lot of people have not done this over the years. They've kind of always accepted the 120-question test they throw out for chiefs and so on and so forth. I can assure you, you'll get better candidates, and you have every right to put together a written exam as a piece of that component. You can do a written exam. I would strongly suggest that you do resumes first, reduce that number. And first and foremost, before you even go that far, you really want to do a very, very critical and thorough job evaluation. As you brought up, sir, the job of policing is very unique to the community. And I won't, again, I don't want to dig down too much tonight, but there are certain things I think you definitely don't want for a candidate, and some that I think you should certainly look at. And you certainly have every right to put that component in. So whatever the board decides, and Ms. Craver, you can certainly incorporate that also.
Which is where I was actually going.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
The
I'm
assessment
not
center.
opposed to an assessment center being a part of the process, which I had said in the beginning. If we can't have the chief's test, which this board, and you hate to say, we wanted them to have as much time to study as possible. And no one could have foreseen this. I would like to see if we can get copies of past tests. I understand that, you know, not everyone tests well, everyone's different, which is why I wanted to have the three pieces. You know, the assessment center, the test, but also this board. Because sometimes it also can come down to personality and who's the right fit for the community. So I still think I'd like to have those three pieces. If we can get past tests, as we discussed, to have our own test be a part of it, to combine with the assessment center and combine with this board. You know, I really also want to make sure that our officers that were moving forward under a certain understanding. The bottom line is it's what's best for the town, but at the same time, I do believe we have the best officers in Massachusetts, and out of respect to them, I want to see us do what's right for the town with them.
If I may, I did
If
have.
that made sense.
It did. It's scary how we're thinking alike. I did have this conversation with civil service, and I had a heated conversation, I'd say, in trying to get past tests. And I asked them, and even talked about the public records law, which they're clearly, you can't get them, no one can get them. But I said, if you're getting out of the business of giving chief police tests, and one of the reasons that they're getting out of the business of doing police chief tests is because of the assessment centers have become so more prevalent that there's not a request for them. I said, then can you give me 3 of the tests and let us just pick and choose, because we want this as rigorous as what you would have done. They have refused, and they have said in no uncertain terms that we will not get any past tests. Now, with that said, I think there may be a little misconception about assessment center. So oftentimes, when people talk about an assessment center, they think of the written test, and then you find out your candidates, and then you put them through a couple of more processes, such as an inbox or a panel, and they have to, discuss their thoughts to try and find out if it's a fit. Assessment centers, generally, if you choose to do 100% assessment center, it does include a written test. And I would recommend that if we put together assessment center, that we use a consulting firm. They'll have the test, and you'll have an opportunity to kind of have them listen to you in how rigorous you want it, what you want in it. And no one would know the questions except for that assessment test. I think that one of the things that you have talked about is transparency, fairness, and really trying to get the candidate who is ready to step into that position as the best fit. So I can work with the interim Chief, but I still would recommend that you have a full assessment center, and as you were planning, and make a good rigorous test to go along with that.
So as far as the test goes, if I may follow it, all those officers who have invested all of that money in study materials, I'm guessing, but in my experience, which is a long, long time ago, when I had to do any kind of studying using materials such as that, there might have been sample tests that you could, or practice tests up, that you could put it that way. Do we have access to any sample or practice tests that might have been incorporated in those study materials that we could build a test from that would be similar to what the state might have given?
Well, first of all, I would suggest that we not talk about what kind of test or where we might get any questions from in this open session. I see a couple taking notes down there. I'm sorry, that was a joke, guys. So I think that we can, I think that all the studying that was done in preparation for this test will not be lost. And again, I would recommend that we do a rigorous written test, and we can work on where those questions come from.
I'm going to go the other side if I can for a second. I'm kind of pleased that we're going to go more the assessment center route, because number one, we're not going to be bound by any constraints, rules of civil service, as to, you know, limitations as to who we get to pick from based on test results. I like the idea that the assessment center is going to give us a little bit more freedom to make sure we are choosing the candidate that's best for the town, the best fit for our department. And on top of that, as Ms. Craver just said, we will have, I mean, these assessment centers are professional. They know what they're doing. They've gone through this. I think we would be able to put together a test that's going to cover a lot of the same type of things that would be covered in a civil service test, and get, you know, and if the goal of that is the results, I think we'll get results, hopefully, and I believe will be, you know, fairly consistent with what we would have gotten through a civil service.
Mr. McGrath?
There's a couple of things that I want to bring up. I think David, I just want to reiterate what David said, which is that I believe we need to make sure that we have people who've invested time already in this. And I want to provide some upward mobility inside the department itself, so that we keep people here, so that the management team, you know, they see that they can move upward inside the department. That being said, I've heard a lot of good things about assessment centers.